Day 1. Number of students, 56. It was 0630 on a Monday morning. We stood in formation. Only 56 of us left. 2 men had rung the bell overnight. I couldn't blame them. But I had a baby on the way. So I stood there, feeling the hair on my legs stand up from the breeze. Yeah, it was June, but these shorts were thin, and the breeze was picking up. Standing behind the formation was Sergeant First Class Erica Granger. I had heard of her, but only through the medical journals I'd read back at Norfolk. She stood 6 feet tall and had a visible bite mark on her otherwise angelic face. The skin around the site was scarred, with black lines tracing down to her neck. She wore an eye patch to cover the left eye removed from the secondary infections caused by the necrosis on her face. But she stood there, not feeling the 50 years she owned, looking no more than 30. She was a legend, not only because of her time in the Spec Ops after the war, or during her groundbreaking research on the virus at Mackinac. It was because Sergeant First Class Erica Granger was one of 2 known people on the planet to survive a zombie bite.
Listen up!
Staff Sergeant Allen walked to the soldier in front of the formation, facing him at attention. The soldier leading the formation saluted. Staff Sergeant Allen returned the salute, relieving the soldier.
All right, all you crazy kids, welcome to the Zombie Combatives Test. This is a prototype pushed out by the Division Commander of 4th ID. Developed at the U.S. Army's Zombie Center for Lessons Learned at Fort Mackinac. It's as close as we can get it to the actual war. These zombies have their hands and jaws removed, making it harder for them to fucking drag your ass down. But do not get complacent in there. All of the zombies in there now are former students of this course who got cornered by 2 or more. Do not get cornered. The only weapons you have are the ones you find in there. There are 2 buildings in front of you. Start on one end. Make your way to the other. Exit the first building. Take any weapons you find with you to the second building. Enter the second building and then get through it. I know your daddy told you stories about clearing Haji out of buildings in the desert. Back when y'all were sitting in the refugee camps, wondering if you were ever gonna meet that sexy someone to touch your special spot. This is not Iraq, you crazy kids. Your only objective is to survive and not get bit. Each team must go through the 2 buildings in under 15 minutes. If they don't make it through in the allotted time, then more zombies will be introduced into the scenario. At the 30-minute mark, the next team will be sent through. Hopefully, you've made it through by then. If not, you're most likely a zombie. Technically, there's no time limit. However, we do not want you hiding in the bathroom till your battle buddies show up to save your dumb ass. So we turn up the heat. The sooner you get done, the fewer zombies you'll have to deal with. Any questions?
A man to my far left raised his hand and said, "I would like to ring the bell, please." Staff Sergeant Allen nodded his head and said,
By all means.
Only 55 left. Staff Sergeant Allen fell out the formation and we paired off. I found the LT, and with a raised eyebrow asked him wordlessly to be my partner. He quietly nodded. There was a loud screaming coming from the building to my left. I couldn't be sure, but it sounded like someone had gotten cornered. No screams from the building in front of me yet. The LT and I were next in line. He stood a foot taller than me, a dark sense of determination in his eyes. This wasn't his first fight. And it wasn't mine either. But my last one was 8 years ago. "Next!" came from Staff Sergeant Allen. I turned to the LT. We played rock, paper, scissors. I hit with rock. He got paper. I guess I was first man in. "No time," the LT yelled. The zombies were coming down the walkway, arms stretched out towards us. "Jump from bunk to bunk," the LT said, as he got to the top bunk on the left row. I did the same on the right. He was much taller than I was, so the idea of moving bunk to bunk was a little bit easier for him. But I managed, my legs weak from lack of exercise. I crouched down uncomfortably, my arthritic knees complaining since they bore most of the weight. Springing with all the power I could muster, I awkwardly leapt from the first bunk to the second, landing on my stomach, legs dangling down. "Fuck!" I said, gasping for breath. I crawled up to the bunk as a zombie got close. I kicked it in the face and it went down to the ground. I saw the wall locker still upright, so I crawled across it, my weight knocking it down as I got to the third bunk. I looked to the left. There were now 3 zombies surrounding the bunk that the LT was on. He was kicking at them as fast as he could, but they would knock over the bunk bed soon enough. I looked down the row of bunks. It was clear. I could leave him and get through this in one piece as the LT distracted the zombies. I wouldn't get disqualified. The best way to escape the bear is to trip your battle buddy. Fuck that. I looked across from me as the 4 zombies were trying to knock over the bunk bed, grasping at the LT with stubby arms that ended at the wrist. There was an overturned wall locker with a sharp-looking corner. I hopped off my bunk and ran to the closest zombie on the right side, grabbing it by the back of its torn army field green uniform and kicking it behind the kneecap, and the zombie stumbled to the ground. My heart was racing as the other zombie next to me lunged, knocking me onto the ground. I pushed up against it as best I could, a gurgling, aggressive scream emanating from the jawless, toothless zombie. Turns out doing the minimum on a PT test doesn't really prepare you to shove an undead monster off you, so the best I could do was keep him at bay, my arms shaking. I laid on my back, looking up and to my right. The zombie whose kneecap I had destroyed was clawing its way to me. At least Maggie was going to get my life insurance policy. I should have rang the bell. I heard a loud gurgle and a slice coming from where the LT was. He was going to get out. Good. Then the zombie on top of me stopped moving. The LT grabbed the corpse and threw it off me, an old Marine Corps K-bar knife in his hand. I offered him my right hand and he took it, pulling me up. "Let's get the fuck out of here," he said as we ran into the center bathroom that connected both buildings. He was the first man in and said, "4 on the ground, to the right." As he moved quickly to the next door, I followed him and glanced briefly to the right. 4 zombies were busy feasting on a student who was still alive. I locked eyes with him, hearing his moans get fainter as the undead feasted on his intestines, a gentle gurgle that punctuated the space between the moans as his eyes asked me why it was his turn to die. I couldn't help him. As I entered to the other side, I saw Private First Class Rockwell, who couldn't have weighed more than 100 pounds, sitting on top of a wall locker. 5 zombies were swinging for him with their handless stumps. "Oh my God, this is it! This is it!" the teenage soldier kept yelling. I saw a knife, maybe 6 inches long, discarded behind the bunk closest to us. I dove for it, and then climbed over the bottom bunk as the LT ran to the center to meet the first zombie, greeting him with a stab to his left temple. My knife firmly in my right hand, I dove to the second bunk, pulling a zombie down and pushing my knife behind the base of the skull. 2 zombies in Army PT uniforms turned their attention towards me, falling onto the bottom bunk as they attempted to grab me. I moved away in time, falling back to the cement floor and scrambling to the center where the LT was. 2 of the zombies were pushing him toward the wall locker on the left side. He put the K-bar in the temple of one zombie, but the other had pushed him to the bottom bunk. I could hear Rockwell jumping from the wall locker to the ground as I ran to the LT. My eyes locked with his, and he closed them immediately, along with his mouth as I stuck my knife into the left temple of the zombie. It was a fresh zombie, only a few months old, so blood splattered out of its temple and onto the LT's face. I threw the zombie off him, only to turn and see the final 2 coming towards me. Then Rockwell ran into the undead monster on my left, knocking it down. I stabbed at the zombie in my right, aiming for the brain but missing several times. The LT had taken his shirt off and wiped the zombie blood off his face, breathing quickly as he wiped with anxious panic. Finally, I got the zombie in the damn brain, and I turned my attention to Rockwell on the floor. He found the LT's K-bar and stabbed the zombie in the base of the skull that was on top of him. I pulled the dead zombie off him and turned to the LT. He was looking at himself in the mirror, terrified that the change was going to begin. "You would have noticed by now," I said. "Really?" he asked. "Yep, you're good. Let's go," I yelled as the 4 zombies from the bathroom began to make their way towards us. We 3 soldiers ran like hell out of the ancient army barracks. Once we got out, the decon teams grabbed the LT and began to scrub him down, along with Rockwell. The medics on staff took quick reaction samples of their blood and inserted them into the zombie test kit. They stood there, shivering from the cold and the adrenaline. Both were holding back the sobs that came from combat, but not by much. The medic shook his head, saying, "Negative. They're clean." Then he handed a blanket to both of them. I walked around to the side of the building, where Staff Sergeant Allen found me and said,
Hot damn, you're a badass. Good job. You passed with a perfect score.
"What's that mean?" I asked.
You didn't take the easy way out. You stayed and helped your battle buddies.
"Oh, good," I told him. "Thanks, Sergeant." He patted me on the shoulder, and then I put my hand over my face and began to sob. The adrenaline was wearing off, but that was only part of it. I never did anything like that before. My arms and legs shook from muscle fatigue. And all I could see in my mind was that soldier, whose name I couldn't remember, moaning gently as the monsters ate him a piece at a time, his eyes wondering what came next, and why the world had to be this way. But at least I was going to get a pension. I could take care of Maggie and the baby. It had to be worth it in the end, right?